We're back with you, back with our guests, survivor activists, Lizanne Etting, together with Pastor Vernon Loka. Continuing with looking forward, giving hope, even coming out of a destructive relationship. You have a chapter in your book, chapter 11 actually, Lizanne, and it's entitled Looking Forward, There is Always Hope. In fact, the very first line starts with, it takes tremendous strength of character to start over. If you can just run us through those points that you enlightened in that chapter.
Yes, Venora, looking forward for me had to mean hope. There is always hope. There is always forgiveness. There is always prayer. And I end the chapter with miracles are real. But I'd like to focus a little bit on the subheading, there is always forgiveness, because that is crucial to be able to move forward with hope as the primary focus. So allow me to read sections of this chapter. Having gone through the forgiveness journey myself, I can share that for me, forgiveness was threefold. Forgiveness of myself, accepting forgiveness from God, and forgiving the one who harmed me. Why do I need to forgive myself? Because I made choices that led to my life journey. Some of those choices were good, some were bad. In taking ownership of my choices, I recognized that yes, I made a mistake, but I am moving on, having learnt from my mistakes. You can't begin to trust yourself and your decision-making abilities if you have not forgiven your past bad choices. Forgiveness is a command from God, as can be seen in the Lord's Prayer in Matthew 6 verse 12. God chooses to love us despite our own bad choices. He will not leave us nor forsake us, even if we do choose to leave Him temporarily, as I did. An essential part of my healing process was reading carefully selected books that I felt would guide me towards growth and healing. For every crisis lie answers in books, and I urge you to read as much as you can. After having read The Shack by William Paul Young, I was able to move on to gain an understanding of forgiveness for the first time in my life. I found it to be a very painful book to read, but it is filled with awe-inspiring truths and lessons. Young states the following regarding forgiveness. Forgiveness is not about forgetting. It is about letting go of another person's throat. Forgiveness does not establish relationship. Forgiveness is first for you, the forgiver, to release you from something that will eat you alive, that will destroy your joy and your ability to love fully and openly. Do you think this man cares about the pain and torment you have gone through? If anything, he feeds on that knowledge. Don't you want to cut that off? And in doing so, you'll release him from a burden he carries, whether he knows it or not. When you choose to forgive another, you love them well. Forgiveness in no way requires that you trust the one you forgive. Forgiveness does not excuse anything. Forgiveness is the risk of faith. Faith does not grow in the house of certainty. And forgiving, for me personally, if I can just delve into that a moment, I did not think that I could forgive. I mean, how do you forgive things like what happened to me and to so many of our listeners? It's hard. It's really, really hard. And if I can share, I did not even want to forgive many times. But William Paul Young, through his book in The Shack, he taught me how to forgive. He encouraged me to just say, I forgive you. I forgive you. Say those words over and over and over again until it became a part of my daily prayers. Yes, it took time, but I can truly say that I have forgiven. Forgiveness is also a tricky one because sometimes you need to forgive the perpetrator more than once. And this too I have learnt. As I discovered more information about my situation, I realized that yes, I may have forgiven for this one act, but I need to forgive again for another. And that is really hard. So having said that, Pastor Vernon, for many people to even think of stepping into another relationship after an abusive one is sometimes an absolute definite no. What guidance can you offer there?
Lizanne, reading your book and those pages in particular really highlighted two areas of forgiveness for me, and I'll discuss those briefly. And the first is for the individual to forgive themselves for being human, because we are all broken, we all make mistakes. So very often I think we punish ourselves for the mistakes we've made, and that just perpetuates the volatility in the marriage or the friendship or the situation. Whereas we need to take a step back figuratively and recognize, yes, this was unwise, it was not the right thing to do, maybe even the ungodly thing to do, and recognize that there are serious consequences and one has suffered those consequences. And forgive yourself for having made this enormous error, whatever it is. It does not necessarily need to be marriage. It could be in any given situation. You simply recognize that what you have done was profoundly ungodly, not the right thing to do. And one needs to believe the self-forgiveness. And you need to own it, you need to embrace it, and recognize it and take responsibility for it. I think that's crucial. The other area of forgiveness, and if I may say very briefly by way of interjection, that we could discuss forgiveness at length. We live in a world which is perpetually unforgiving. Every day the media give us accounts of unforgiveness. But an area of forgiveness that very often is overlooked is that you don't need to be physically present with the perpetrator or with the one who has done you harm. In some cases, once again, my experience, the spouse or the mother or the father or the child is dead. And it's impossible to forgive or to ask for forgiveness. And so one needs to do what I call some mental gymnastics here. And you need to, in your mind, present yourself to the one that's harmed you and either offer forgiveness or ask to be forgiven. And I think psychologically that's quite releasing. It's emotionally therapeutic and it's psychologically therapeutic because you're doing the best that you can either to forgive or to ask for forgiveness. So forgiveness, allow me to repeat myself, does not have to be, in my view, in the presence of the individual every time and one walks away with a warm, fuzzy feeling. I think one needs to engage your mind fully in the process. Having said that, an area that I've come across very often, and maybe in particular remarriage, is the person that seeks the remarriage has not forgiven, and yet they believe that they can go into another relationship on a sound footing. So initially they will say to me, and I've heard this statement so often, too often, I will never get married again, or I will never trust again, or I will never engage in that friendship again. Now that to me is a symptom of not having dealt with an area of forgiveness. And I say that because that self-same person and many of those individuals, in one particular case, after 3 months, after a particularly unsavory divorce, I was approached to conduct a remarriage of a lady who assured me that she had dealt with the matter and that she had forgiven, but she hadn't. And I didn't have the inclination to deal with that in a counseling situation. After 3 months after the divorce, she remarried, only to have a divorce within 9 months of the second marriage, because she had not dealt with, and I'm saying she because of this case is very much in my mind, but many men as well, they avow never to get married, don't deal with forgiveness, go into another marriage or relationship with a destructive baggage that simply carries on into the next marriage, and often multiple marriages. So forgiveness is a key element in moving forward because it's liberating and it frees the individual or the couple from this unnecessary burden of suffering and pain and guilt that God wishes to relieve us from. So my view on forgiveness is, and I think going forward, it's an area that I would tackle more vigorously should I be presented with these scenarios, and particularly after reading your book.
Thank you, Vernon. That helps because often we as victims or survivors, we think we're okay, we think we've dealt with everything, but we're not. So questions from a soundboard like a pastor or a counselor that scratch a little bit, where you look for things that need to be dealt with, that's necessary. It's uncomfortable and it's painful to deal with them, but in order to move forward, you have to be willing to walk the walk and talk the talk.
Absolutely. And I think once one has dealt with that, if you've looked I'm using a biblical phrase now, but if you've looked the demon in the eye, you know how to handle the demon. It's a comment that I made to a lady just the other day that I was counseling about anxiety and depression, part of my work with the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. And my comment to her was, look the anxiety in the eye. And the term I used with her is crush it. Or look the depression in the eye. And I think in marriage, it's look this issue in the eye. It's not going to kill you. A thought is not going to harm you. A thought is nothing more than a thought. Very often it's not a reality. And so you can deal with it far more effectively knowing that it's nothing more than a thought, but a real and painful thought. But it won't harm you if you deal with it as you should. If I may repeat the phrase, look it in the eye, recognize it, and dismiss it where it needs to be. If it's true, if one has contributed to the abuse or you've contributed to the violence or the aggression, then you need to recognize that. Look it in the eye and accept it. It's true and not continue that pattern.
And that'll ensure once one is able to forgive yourself, forgive your abusive partner, that you can start in a new relationship truly clean and on a good note.
Absolutely. The phrase I would use, you can start the new relationship with a great amount of confidence because you've eliminated a lot of the destructiveness that you would have brought into the new relationship, marriage, friendship, had you not dealt with it. With a counselor who can recognize these things, and very often counselors are good at that. They can pick up what the couple can't see and what they don't want to see. And one needs to probe into those areas. I call it the red zone, where it's often needs to be handled very sensitively because the couple don't want to deal with it. And they deny it. Whereas you see it as a counselor, it's fairly obvious. And I think good counselors do pick that up, and they're very helpful in that regard.